Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today Joseph Atwill is back, and we are going to talk about leaving our sheep mentality behind and how that can be achieved, and how his work also adds to that. So, Joseph, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me, Judith.
Yeah. When I thought about this subject, um, I remembered that, and basically every culture has that. We have certain stories, myths, legends to scare little children and to keep them in line. For example, Krampus is the one who will come and punish you if you have been a naughty child. And but when I think about it, it's not that much different for adults.
No, it's not. I mean, we are controlled not by fairy tales but by history, um,
Mhm.
which are in fact or is in fact a fantasy in and has been something that is constructed like the children fairy tales for the purpose of social control. So I wrote Caesar's Messiah, which talked about Christianity and how it had been produced for social control. Um, and of course, today, we have, many other so purportedly historical stories which are used for social control. I think, the way that World War II is presented is, a fantasy created for social control. The situation that led to the current destruction going on in Gaza is, sad to say, but it's another fantasy constructed just to create a pretext for genocide. And this is just this long-standing application of, uh, what can be called narratives, so that the oligarchs can basically keep their populations stupefied and rule over them without any trouble. Christianity led directly to the Dark Ages, the feudal system, in which the Pope was at the top, the emperor beneath him, and then a strict hierarchy down to the serf or the common man or person. The word serf means slave, and the slavery of serfdom was very, very intense. They couldn't leave the area they're born in. Their children could be taken. They had to sign a oath of fealty to whichever administrator who was directly above them, and so it was a 100% slave world. And it also was an intellectually debased world. There was no uh, education for any of these people, and so Europe, which had been on an incredible trajectory of academic achievements, plunged into the Dark Age with the onset of the Christian control, and wherein, like in the first century, and you had just every imaginable kind of scientific advancement going on. The Romans were right at the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. They only needed basically the piston engine, which they were working on. So, we could have had the Industrial Revolution occur 2,000 years earlier, except for the fact that the oligarchs didn't see it as to their benefit, and they plunged us instead into the Dark Ages, which I think is still reverberating, obviously, throughout the European world, in that Europeans have been made kind of unconsciously, but nevertheless, profoundly docile, intimidated, um, easy to believe what they're told. So these elements of social control that occurred, at the, with Christianity and the feudal system, in my opinion, are still strongly in play in the European personality. Um, we just put up with any ludicrous fantasy that the government tells us. We never seem to rebel against it. I mean, recently you've had this climate change narrative presented to us, and obvious to the farmers, this will lead to food shortages and starvation. And of course, the science behind purported climate change is, well, it's weak to say the least. So why would they promote it in this way? Well, because it's population reduction. It's simple as that. So I'm happy to see that the farmers have rebelled and that this rebellion is occurring and is ongoing. Um, Hopefully, we can use this as a springboard into increasing protests, and not just protests, but basically overturning of the government. I mean, what has happened, Judith, is pretty simple, really, to understand, structurally. A secret society has taken control of European political apparatus, and they present false images to us about who they are and what they represent and what they stand for. But they control our political power, and they use it for destruction of Europeans. They hate us. They want us off the planet or enslaved. And so you get things like World War I or World War II, which are just preposterous events in terms of what would be the rationale to bring these things about, but make perfect sense from the perspective of a secret society, which I refer to as Judeo-Masonic. I This is a difficult concept to understand, and I should explain it. I'm not saying that this is a project of all of the Jews, but the group that has created this structure has some kind of relationship with Freemasonry, which is the other aspect of it. And the Judeo side of it, which you can see in the banking families and so many, kind of Jewish financiers who have political power. It has a way of basically using its ethnic separateness, this small group, to keep it from being observed closely. So between the general public's sort of understanding of the world and the secret society that rules them, you have things like the Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. These are very powerful concepts. They keep people from thinking, they keep them from acting. And then on the Masonic side of this, well, it simply is a secret society. There's no getting into it. It's impenetrable. You have outer rings of these lower levels, but at the top, no one can get into it. No one knows what's going on. And I would just assert that, if you kind of observe Freemasonry, as its behavior, you can see just how nihilistic, self-serving, and evil it actually is. And so when you see Masonic organizations, annexes of Freemasonry, like Bohemian Grove or Skull and Bone or World Economic Forum, I would assert, this is a problem because you have a secret society rather than something that is exposed to analysis by democracy, right? You have these secret societies which have obtained control, and so democracy doesn't have any way to look inside these things or to have any influence or try to prevent the organization from destroying and behaving malevolently toward the population. A really good example of this is Zionism. I think this is probably a really great place for people who want to sort of understand the world to start. And Zionism, though it is given to us as a kind of intrinsic Jewish project, I mean, it's not at all. I mean, it begins the political power and the political process that creates the state of Israel begins in 1840 with Lord Palmerston, declaring now is the time for the Jews to return to Israel. This was completely rejected by the Jews of the day, who were primarily what's called Reform Judaism. And Reform Judaism was not Zionistic. In fact, it was the opposite. They were talking about how the prophets of Israel might be something that would be of benefit to all mankind, and that how the moral principles, uh, whatever one defines these things as, inside of the Jewish religion could be basically expanded into a kind of multicultural, multinational, and multi-religious project that would be beneficial to the world. I mean, it's really important, I think, to understand the works of, Reform Judacists like Abraham Geiger and whatnot, who talked about this, because the reason why it's so important is because then you can juxtapose that to the Freemasonry understanding of Israel, which was not the one that the Reform Jews had, who were horrified by the idea of Zionism. They knew perfectly well that the land was occupied by the Palestinians, and they knew perfectly well that it could never be a homeland for the Jews without violence against the population that lived there. They were aware of this, and so they protested. They had a series of protests, but this was all swept aside because the Masonic project had the power of money and politics, political power. And so long before it became a Jewish sort of project, between 1840 and say 1890, you had the British Freemasonry and the Freemason Grand Master families conduct a series of you know surveys in Palestine. And the purpose of this is they were trying to figure out where the best places to put the the initial immigrants that they were intending to go into Palestine, the Jewish immigrants that they were going to place, where to put them, where they could take food, grow food, and so that this was how for 50 years this went on. The Freemasons conducted survey after survey. The British troops started to move into the area. The Rothschilds bought the Suez Canal. And so you started having all of this British Freemason influence in the area, which after enough time had passed, so they had a complete understanding of the situation, they then began the Jewish phase of it, which was started with Herzl. At least, he could be seen as one of them. And Herzl was simply an employee of British Freemasonry. I mean, you can actually look at Herzl's initial speeches, and they are copies of speeches that Disraeli gave. So, and in fact, Herzl had a nickname when he was in college, was Tancred, which was a character from a Disraeli novel, showing how influenced he was and how his movement was simply an annex of the Freemason project. So now you have so after the proto-Zionist movement, you now go on to the Jewish Zionist movement. And Herzl sets up a situation where then you have Ben Gurion and Golda Meir and Menachem Begin and all of these individuals who are promoting just out and out Jewish immigration into Palestine. Now, the the force of immigration was resisted. The Arabs could see that this wasn't going to go to a good place. They hadn't been told at that point that the Jews were simply going to destroy them and get rid of all of them in this area, but they could see that it could end up with them having no political power. And so they, when World War I loomed, you had the critical moment in Zionism, which was the exchange between Hussein and McMahon And in the exchange, McMahon told Hussein that if the Arabs uh, left the Ottoman Empire and went on the side of the British and fought against the Ottomans, that they would then be given political control over Arabia. And this certainly included Palestine. I mean, there are some people who try to parse the language of the correspondence, but that's just ludicrous. I mean, both men knew the area well enough to understand that everything from basically the Suez, from Egypt all the way to Iraq, this was Arabia, and this was going to be under Arab political control. So this was the promise. Now, it's fortunate that there's actually a letter by McMahon, which I think is the most important document in the history of Zionism. Everyone who wants to have an informed understanding of it needs to have, be aware of what McMahon said, because he described what went on between him and Hussein. And so I actually have it right here. So let me just read the excerpts from him. And he
Mhm.
goes, I don't take the idea of a future strong, united, independent Arab state too seriously. Um, I do not for one moment go to the length of imagining that the present negotiations will go far to shape the form of Arabia, um, and bind our hands, right? In other words, stop British control over it. And he says that what we have to arrive at now, and these three sentences are just absolutely critical. I guess it's two sentences. He says, what we have to arrive at now is to tempt the Arab people into the right path, detach them from the Ottomans, and bring them onto our side. This, on our part, is at present largely a matter of words, right? And to succeed, we must use persuasive terms and abstain from academic haggling over conditions. All right, so what he's saying is pretty unambiguous. He's saying we've got to tempt the Arab people into the right path, and it's just a matter of words. In other words, we're lying. So when the Palestinians say that their land was stolen, this is the receipt. This is the documentation. So what happens is the Arabs then accept the British words as real, and they go on the side of the British and they pay the blood price. They had 100,000 fatalities in the war fighting for the British. They had 500,000 casualties. This is the blood price they paid. But they were willing to pay it because they saw this uh, Arabia that they would have political control over at the end of all of it. However, as you can see from McMahon's letter describing the correspondence, the Brits are lying. British are simply lying, and they paid. So they paid with their lives for political control over Arabia, the area between Iraq and Egypt, and the Brits did not give it to them. So this is the fact that Palestine was stolen. It's just as clear as is imaginable. Anyone who can read these words, who can come up to another understanding, show me the semantics, because I think this is as clear as it's ever going to get. So what happens is after World War One, then the Arabs are confused because they thought they had this agreement. Suddenly, the Balfour Declaration, which says that the Jews can establish a homeland there, comes out. This is basically an illegal document. It is in breach of what they had agreed to, but nevertheless occurs. And then Picot's, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which enables France to have control over some of the region, also is a violation of this agreement that the British had made for the Arabs to fight for them. And then the sad negotiation between, like the end of World War One and the end of World War Two, the Arabs were thinking that they could have negotiations that were honest with the British, but as everything that I've said shows the British and the Israeli Zionists were just one organization. There was no difference between them. The Brits were Freemasons. McMahon was the head Freemason of the region. So there's that. Um, and all of the different commissions, the Peel commissions, the different things the British set up. I mean, they should be studied as techniques in distraction and delay, uh, all of during which the British and everyone basically under Masonic control was inserting more and more Jews into the region. And so then, following World War II, you had the Nakba, where overnight they drove. The Jews had gained enough military power; they were able to drive most of the Arabs out of the region they wanted and set up the nation of Israel, which now its proponents have the audacity to claim that it wasn't stolen. But as I think everything that I have stated here, so far is just documentable. Their claims are just sophistry, and
Mm.
and it's so anyway. So Palestine was stolen, and now you have this really horrible situation in Gaza. And I just wanted to take a second and comment on how miserable this situation is, because the conditions of the October 7th invasion, so called, are ludicrous. They're like a bad Hollywood movie with hang gliders and girls in bikinis being raped and attacked, and people dance. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Um, this is a pretext. A pretext was established so that now the Israelis can continue the basically uh, the clearing of all of
Mhm.
the populations, of racial genocide that were in the land that they wanted to have to set up Israel. And so, um, when you look at and then just to point out that you can't separate the current slaughter that's going on in Gaza from the context of the slaughter that's been going on in Palestine since 1890, 1900. I mean, you can look at the letters that the Jewish Zionists had among themselves. There's a great book called Expulsion of the Palestinians by Noor Mersala, where he's assembled a lot of these letters, and people can read them, and you can see just how murderous and racist the Jews were in relationship to the Palestinians. So they then, went forward and removed them from the land. And now you have this last stroke where they created a pretext, and now they're slaughtering the Palestinian people. The pretext is to create a kind of distraction and bamboozlement so the public doesn't see that it's just a bold-faced genocide. But no one, I think, who understands the situation historically could come to any other understanding of it. And it's very, very chilling, because when you think of all of the political power that Jews have throughout the world and Freemasons have throughout the world, secret society members, um, well, when you look at the Palestinians and how they're treating them, I mean, they have a kind of murderous philosophy. This is very chilling, because you have to wonder, well, where will this stop? I mean, if do they want the world for themselves? Because there just isn't any political resistance to an absolutely overt genocide. So where will resistance begin? Right. So that's my take on our current situation, Judith. I hope it isn't upsetting to people, but that's just how I see it.
Mm. So when you say, yes, we plunged into the dark ages,
Yeah.
and you connected that to Christianity, is it possible that Christianity was hijacked by a group of, yeah, what we would call clergy, and they erected this feudal system? Or do you see that such a system is the only outcome that can come out of Christianity? Because I don't see it. I'm not a fan of Christianity, but I don't see how a feudal system is promoted there. Maybe you can.
Sure. Um, well, the basic principle of the feudal system was the fact that the Pope, the Pontiff Maximus, was God's representative on earth. And basically, this was the political power that set up the feudal system.
Yeah,
Constantine was the one who began the process by which Christianity became the state religion. And he also is the one who started the process by which the feudal system could be established. So it all really starts with Constantine. I mean, until then, Christianity hadn't been part of such a focused social control. But once Constantine started the two projects, they were fused. They were just one project. One part of it was the religious side, where the Pope would become God's vicar on earth and would have all power. I mean, he there was no power that was kept from him, um, and he worked hand in hand with the emperor. So this was the political side of it. On the educational and kind of lifestyle side of it, Constantine set up the feudal system with the. I mean, first thing he did was he got rid of the coloni, which was class of people who owned land. He set up edicts to get rid of them, and the state then would control the land. And this began the whole process by which the serf was enslaved. It took a while; it wasn't done overnight, but eventually the process Constantine established came into power, and the coloni, who had been a free and land-owning individual with political power, was turned into a person who did not own the land, couldn't leave, his children could be taken by the state, had to retain the job description of his parents unless given permission to do otherwise. And it isn't, this power is not specific inside of Christianity. Christianity was just the religion that they used. They could have used any number of them if they'd wanted to, but this religion was the one that was used. Constantine, if you read Caesar's Messiah, you can see that the religion was originally done, for a couple of reasons. The reason the Gospels were written, one was just vanity of the Caesar. They were trying to show that they were actually the God of the Jews. And if you read Caesar's Messiah, you can see how the wordplay and kind of typologic system they used to achieve that. But the political purpose was just to make people less rebellious. Blessed are the peacemakers. You have to think of the political problems Rome was facing at that moment because of the Jewish messianic movement. And so Christianity was done with the hope that it could control that political force. It failed. The Jews had a number.
Mhm.
The Jews
Okay.
had a number of rebellions, but there's nothing indigenous to Christianity in terms of the feudal system. It was just the religion that they used to create the idea of God and Jesus, Savior, so that the oligarchs would have that as a narrative with which they could use to have social control.
Yeah. So in other words, it was hijacked.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't. I'm not sure I'd use the word hijacked. I mean, the oligarchs invented the religion, but
Mm.
the purpose of the religion changed through time, I'm sure. And the oligarchs, uh, I mean, they wanted to use the kind of power that monotheism gives to the controller of the religion,
Mm,
um, for the purpose of social control. Uh, I mean, in a way, it's just completely self-evident. You know, you look at what um, Catholicism was during the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, and it was just an aspect of the control, worked hand in hand with the political side of it.
mm,
So, but they didn't need. I mean, there's nothing in the words per se, that sets up the feudal system in the Gospels or in Revelation. It's more. This was just a monotheistic religion that the Roman oligarchs had created. They obviously would have controlled all of the bureaucracy of it, and so that was just a trusted vehicle with which they could use to set up the feudal system.
mm. Yeah, because I cannot even find yeah, one hint that would have, in the scriptures have a basis for a Vatican or for a Pope.
Well,
I
I mean,
mean,
I'll give you some. Think of
okay,
think of Paul saying, "Obey the magistrates," right? And
okay.
that magistrates are there because God put them there. And if you rebel against the magistrates, you're rebelling against God. I mean, there is the feudal system right there. There is the in those words is the specific apparatus narrative that is going to get that the oligarchs will use Christianity for. It's right there.
Mhm. So that, um, do you see something like that even before Paul? What about Jesus and his take on taxes?
Well, I mean, it's ambivalent. It's complicated. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Right now, that's a, a, a religious basis for paying taxes. Right, and it can, I mean, the words are vague enough that they can mean different things, but just on their face, it's a religious basis for paying taxes. So you can see how clever the oligarchs are. What they're saying is, if you don't pay taxes, it isn't a sin against us; it's a sin against God. See, this is the narrative, the bamboozlement. This is the confusion that is deliberately structured into the minds of Christians, so that they don't question the political apparatus around them that has basically enslaved them. You know, once you have the breakdown of the Christian political power, then things change dramatically. But until then, during the period of the Dark Ages, you really can't, I think, honestly describe Christianity as other than a religion of slaves. And for the control of slaves. That's how it was
Mm,
used.
mm. So now what I would say, the people during the Dark Ages, a huge chunk of them, the majority even wasn't able to read or write. But we cannot say that these days. Yes, I know, even here in Germany, the education is going down the crapper. The latest PISA study showed that a lot of 9 and 10-year-olds cannot do simple mathematics or read and write correctly. Okay, so we are there already again. And but for the most part, most of us are able to read and write. And yet, we don't seem to be a bit wiser. Although, we are flooded with so-called information, and a lot of it is really useless, but it appears to me that although we have all these trinkets, abilities, technology, um, we still cannot see through the bamboozlement. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and it's incredible, isn't it, that you have such sophistication in the technology, which unfortunately is being used by the oligarchs. I mean, think about Facebook or Google, and think of how they use the control of the internet to create um, political positions in the people who experience it. You know, they have what's called nudge technology, where this has been quite publicized recently in the United States, that they can see what you're like by your tastes in Facebook and Google, and then they can customize, these algorithms, and using AI and computer technology, they can customize what feeds, what information then comes up seemingly chaotically, but in fact by a design for the purpose of moving you in the direction that they know they can move you. And they can steadily move you toward a political position, or to a sense of things are fine, or whatever it is they're trying to establish. So, and of course, in terms of political control, this is very powerful, because they can get you to vote for people, or not like people, or not vote for someone. This is so simple using the internet now, and a population that is not, as you say, not very well educated. Um, the great problem is that we have no skepticism. We just are used to believing things, and the great hope is that the independent media, which you're to be congratulated for being a part of, are trying to create skepticism, trying to stay open to new ideas, trying to analyze the received narratives, to not just simply believe what we're told. Um, and even though, they are trying to basically take us to a post-electric world, I would say. In other words, they are trying to make us more primitive. You can see this everywhere in the United States. The fact is that many people are not going along with this, and I think that you can see signs of real hope. One statistic that I think is valuable is that over half the people in the United States are registered as independents. They've dropped out of the Republicans and the Democrats. I think this is absolutely wonderful. This is a real good indicator. And there was also real resistance against the narratives for the vaccine. In the United States, over a third of the population didn't take them, even though we were bombarded constantly with propaganda about how effective they were and about how safe they were. But nevertheless, there was skepticism. In fact, I would say that the vaccine mandates failed, in that if they tried it again, there would be far more than 50% wouldn't take them. There'd be real, I mean, physical resistance against that now, because the people came to their own conclusion. They stopped believing. Many of them stopped believing in the government puppets who came on and talked about science, or whatever it is, they claimed that they had in back of the thing. And so now I think you have, kind of diminishing returns, where they try propaganda like the vaccine mandates, but they end up with too much skepticism, and they get the exact opposite effect they want. More people walk into the light and rebel than become docile and enslaved. And I think it sort of happens with Gaza as well. I am amazed at the degree of anger and the depth of it inside, like, the American population. There's just a large fraction, 40%, I would guess, that doesn't buy, simply do not believe what they're being told about it. So these are the things that the independent media has to promote and accelerate, is that our political system, our power, the political power, or the society that runs it, is a secret society, and it is in opposition to the people. This is a fact we have to, get out. When you see Angela Merkel, She's not a real, she's not a real German. This is not a honest German person. This is what I would call a lifetime actor. This is someone from a different political and ethnic perspective. She is not a German. So, but she presents herself as such. When you see, Joe Biden, I honestly, he says he's a Catholic. I mean, what sort of a Catholic is this? So, we have to look at the political class as lifetime actors. You can't believe anything that they tell us about themselves. They have used the identity they give as one of their powerful tools to control us. So that's the first step, and then the second step is that what they give us as history as lies. It's lies for social control. I mean, if you've ever read, there's a really good book called "The Hoax of the 20th Century," I think it's called. Um, yeah, "The Hoax of the 20th Century" by Arthur Butz, B-U-T-Z. It would be illegal in Germany, as I understand the laws, to publish, but it's online. The Unz Review, and Unz is incidentally a Jew, so take of that what you will. But in the hoax of the 20th century, Buds makes the case that the Holocaust was in large part a manufactured propaganda narrative that is being used for social control. And I would simply say, I would suggest people read his work, which is, as I said, it's online. You don't have to pay money for it. Because I would say that the case he makes is simply, it like demonstrates its case. He just says, look, there's just too many inexplicable and outright inaccurate claims that help make up this narrative. And then when you look at how the narrative is used, well, I mean, it's designed to prevent people from thinking, from bringing any criticism toward either, like our governments or Israel or Jewish oligarchs like Soros who have a lot of political power and do a lot of political activity, but can't be criticized because to do so, you get into this claim of anti-Semitism, which leads to even Holocaust denial. So we're controlled. We have these what I would call self-correcting structures when they use an expression like conspiracy theorist or anti-Semite or Holocaust denier. Those terms are designed and have been basically implemented as propaganda so that when they're used, the effect is for people to stop thinking. It
Mhm.
ends the discussion. They don't go any further. And this is wrong. I mean, I would advocate the correct response to all this would be simply the Socratic method, the good old Socratic method. This is what was taken away from Europe. This is what we lost,
Mhm.
which is just logic and facts and reasoning that we can honestly exchange with one another and know how to do it. If we have the Socratic method replace the current state of intimidation that Europeans have been put into since the Dark Ages, what would happen is that we would be able to support one another to uplift our intellectual capacity, which has been deliberately damaged. And you talk about now they're even not educating children. They have all of these explanations why they're not doing it, but it's obviously just part of this process by which they're making us intellectually feeble so that we can't scrutinize the political class that rules us. That's or the historical narratives that they give us, which are used as part of their social control. So the
Yeah.
Socratic method needs to be promoted by the independent media, where we just ask that we don't believe anything. I have said, made the little witty, hopefully witty comment that, we know more about the future than we do about the past,
Oh, yeah.
because at least the future is a blank slate at this point, whereas the past is just a pack of lies. So So we have no real way of knowing about the past. What we have in the present is we have reason, and we have the ability to analyze facts and use logic, right? And so the Socratic method, which we need to implement among ourselves, Europeans need to recreate the Socratic method, which is our birthright. I mean, you know, Socrates was involved in its production, and use this to always help us to be logical, to be based in facts, and to have no intimidation. No intimidation is permitted within the Socratic method. Nothing can stop us from continuing the analysis, from continuing the process to get to the truth. You know, this is all that, and this is what we must do is
Yeah,
to, is to create this as a absolutely axiomatic way in which Europeans communicate. We
mm,
can no longer sit there and, have them spin out concepts like anti-Semitism or conspiracy theorists and then have us stop thinking. This isn't going to work. We need to never permit intimidation to be, what controls our mind. We must completely commit ourselves to to facts and reasoning and logic, and to examine every single part of the political structure that controls us. Because
yeah,
looking at World War One, World War Two, and the vaccine mandates, there is something evil and malevolent inside our political class. And this is my assertion. And I think if we simply shine the light of the Socratic method upon it, everyone will be able to understand this. And
yeah,
if we do this, Judith, we can then make the political changes we need to get some democratic representation, so that instead of climate change leading to a reduction in agriculture, this preposterous
mm,
kind of claim that's being made, you would get to a system in which we would be basically trying to use democracy to promote our interests, to promote our lives, our children's lives, and have some value in our existence, and not just be these kind of leading lives of intimidation and of diminished returns, and with a future that's always darker than the moment we have now. I mean, these are the elements of the political society we have now. These aren't the manifestations of democracy. We need to make democracy work for our benefit.
mm. So when I look back at the Dark Ages, although the people couldn't read or write, eventually they moved out of it. We had the Renaissance, we had the Enlightenment age. Do you think that ultimately all oppressive systems have an, yeah, let's say, best before date, that they are bound to fail sooner or later?
No,
No?
I think they can go on for as long as they're able to. They benefit the oligarchs, and there's nothing endemic inside of that system that will just go poof and they disappear. The only way they'll ever, you know, stop is if they are brought to an end. I mean, this is not going to occur by some kind of organic process. It's going to occur by political and rebellious activity. If you look at, the end of the Dark Ages, one of the large components in that was the rediscovering of the Greek intellectual life. I mean, the Dark Ages had completely taken all of the elements that led to the Socratic method and destroyed them. They had to, because they couldn't have this circulating inside of the slave populations, because it would make them think more clearly and rebel. So when when the when the Crusaders discovered in what was called the Holy Lands, Arabic translations of the Greek philosophy and logic um, books, they brought them back to Europe, and they were translated into European languages. And this was really the beginning of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, is because they rediscovered these things. And here's a little, like a little way showing how profound the Dark Ages were. In the universities, they only had two subjects that were taught. There was theology, which was the study of God, and biology, which was the study of God's work. These were the two things that were, students studied and when they went to universities in the Dark Ages. When they found the Arabic translations of the Greek intellectual products, they didn't know what to do with them, and so they developed a new, basically, department in the universities which studied the works of humans, and it was called humanity. So the humanity departments, which are now common in our universities, were actually the result of the people in the Middle Ages who didn't know what to do with the works that were of human production that had such profundity. You see what I mean? It was really the humanity departments were really what led the creation of the Renaissance, because from that, from the rediscovery of the of Aristotle's principles of logic, and you know Archimedes and things like this, people started to realize that really, humans could achieve basically everything that they needed. They simply didn't need God to have a world that was beneficial, and so this was how it came about, is that the Socratic method led us out of the Dark Ages. Now, unfortunately, oligarchs being what they are, they were able to basically reorganize themselves, and a new group came into power, the Masons, Freemasonry. It then reestablished different ways of social control, and now when you look at German school children who can't read and write, well, you can see what they have in mind. It's the reestablishment of the feudal system.
Mhm. Yeah. So that means we are still under the same system, and it appears that they will never give up to get us back into the feudal
No, they
system.
won't. They are dedicated to themselves, and feel, it's always the vanity of the oligarchs. I mean, when you're an oligarch, it's easy to be vain because you have power and the people around you don't. And that configuration is an evil one. It promotes malevolent behavior from the oligarchs, and they particularly by bamboozlement, by fooling people. They put up people like Obama. He's an African American supposedly, and he's going to help kind of have a higher level of humanism outside the United States. But then it turns out, well, he's actually a neocon product of the oligarchs who is just promotes war everywhere, and gives nothing to the African Americans in the inner city. Their plight just continues to deteriorate constantly under his reign. So this is just a really good example of bamboozlement. How easy the public is to be fooled. You put someone in front of them that they think is their representative, and then what happens is acceptable. See how simple it is. But the fact is that he was a representative of the oligarchs and not of the people, certainly not of the African Americans. So we have to recognize their techniques and use our understanding of logic and reasoning and facts to clarify this for everyone. We have to clarify our historical understanding so it doesn't weigh on us any longer in our thinking. And we also have to re-engage all of us into logic and objectivity and courage, because it isn't just thinking skills that we lost, but also courage. We are easily intimidated and very, very slow to act. Look at all of the people who took the vaccine, for God's sakes. I mean, it's incredible. They put something into them that was a genetic operation in all of their cells that had no safety trials, and they just believed, that this was somehow beneficial. Well, it's just a sad fact that majority of people are feeble mentally, right? I mean, and getting worse. And we have to look to the group that is not vaccinated, to use an expression, who is skeptical and whose thinking skills are improving and becoming more powerful, and try to, with that group, organize political power. We can't try to save everybody. It's impossible. You have to let not the vast majority, but certainly a majority of people living inside of America and Europe now are not going to be able to make a transition to, clear-mindedness, I would think. They just have it'd just be too long. They have the potential, but they just have had too much training in the wrong direction. However, the statistics are very clear that the independent media is growing faster and faster. And I would just point out, Judith, that the future you can kind of see in that once someone becomes an adherent of what I would call the independent media, once someone wants to listen to someone like you and understands what you're saying, right, and is interested in that, they never, ever, ever return to the dark ages. I've never met a single person that entered in to, a point where they were laughing at the expression conspiracy theory, who then suddenly goes, I've had an epiphany, and I now think that 911 wasn't an inside job. I've never met anyone like that. It's one-way traffic, one way, because the mind is actually, the human brain is designed for reason. And once it gets moving in that direction, you see what happens is it doesn't take a lot of skepticism to stop the propaganda from working. And once the propaganda stops working, once the being is left basically to his own devices, and the oligarch's propaganda can't simply move him in the direction he wants, he will not return to his pen. He won't return to the darkness. It's impossible. So this is really, good news. There will be a large group going forward that is skeptical and clear-minded and will resist. Obviously, it isn't going to get to the conclusion of all this at any one moment soon, but it's going to slowly get more and more intense. And, I think that the future will be very, very interesting.
Yeah, and as long as that is going on, it is simply our duty to educate ourselves and to read and to
reach
get
out.
knowledge.
And reach out. And Judith, you're to be congratulated for reaching out as you do. And I hope you just continue it, as long and with as much effort as you can as possible going forward, because this is what's critical right now. This is what has to happen. Is you and many others like you need to continue to reach out and continue to inspire and clarify, people's thinking.
Yeah, I would love if everybody who at least gets it a little bit would start doing that work.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. This is what I try to promote whenever I can. Is just if you get it, you have a responsibility to promote it. So
yeah. So
well,
Joseph,
right. I want to thank you very much for having me. I hope I can come back again.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
and I hope next time my voice will be a little bit stronger. I hope I was um, legible, excuse me, audible to people, because my voice has been a little weak lately. I've been talking too much, but we'll get stronger over the next week because have a period of peace, and so hopefully I can come back and I'll be have a better voice.
Okay, we will certainly do that. So, and that was it. We will no longer strain his voice today. And we see you our next guys.
Yeah, thank you all, Judith. Thank
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Bye bye.